Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be asking the question, is this a video essay or does this guy just need a hug? Also, yes, my face is back. Hi, how's it going? The truth is, this video isn't really for any of you guys. This video is for me, which is kind of true for all of my videos, but especially for this one. I know this channel is about media, particularly games, and I promise we'll get into that a little bit soon, but I need to give a bit of personal context first. A couple of days ago, I moved. For the last year or so, I've been living in a new city with one of my friends, and in the last 5 months, I've been living there with 2 friends. And to put it as simple as possible, I loved it there. I not only loved living with those roommates, but I loved the city and everyone else I knew, including my roommate's girlfriend, who I won't indulge with a name like she so desperately wants. And for those of you who are keeping a keen eye on that whole saga from that other video, I regret to inform you that I was not able to steal her before I left. Truly one of life's greatest disappointments. Recently, I got into grad school, which is pretty great, but it's in a different city, in a different country, and I'm gonna be all by myself. Life goes on for everyone I knew this past year, but it goes on without me, and it's really hard to see a situation where I end up living with the same group of people in this kind of context, so it's got me thinking a lot about endings. Now, I hate endings, but I will admit that I'm of the mindset that we don't get enough of them in our personal lives and in the things we use to escape. I did promise we'd get into the media side of things eventually, so that's what we'll do now. Nearly everything that becomes somewhat popular either never dies or dies ungracefully, including things that could have been just nice one-off stories. Look at The Lion King. That is a perfect, isolated, definitive piece of media, but then they made a direct-to-video sequel, a direct-to-video half-sequel that asked the important question, but how exactly was Timon bullied as a child? They made shows, they made a live-action remake which is entirely animated, so explain that one to me, and now we're getting another movie. And that's just the major stuff, there's all this other bullshit too. God forbid you have a definitive ending to a franchise as well. Harry Potter, solid ending, solid adaptation. Let's make a bad play and a 5-movie series based off a textbook and some games and a new adaptation. It feels like nothing popular ends because it just keeps printing money. So when something popular does end, it feels very refreshing, and at the risk of sounding like a one-trick Sony pony, this is something I've always appreciated about Uncharted. We're now at the point where I'm basically just mentioning Uncharted in every single video, and then apologizing for mentioning Uncharted as well. I need like a tally or something. I've talked about my excitement around Uncharted 4 to death at this point, but what I've never actually mentioned is that at first, I was actually kind of worried about it. To me, I thought Uncharted 3 had a pretty solid ending, and the games generally never had the most seamless transitions from one to another, so I was like, alright, this is kind of beating a dead horse. What contrived reason are they gonna give for Drake to be a rambunctious, swashbuckling bachelor again after apparently having a happy ending last time? And then Naughty Dog said, this is the last thing we do with Nathan Drake. And all of a sudden, I'm on board. I was worried this series was just gonna be stretched thin, but once I realized we had an explicit ending, I thought, okay, maybe they do have a story they want to tell. Seeing Nathan swim out of that cave at the end and say his goodbyes, find a true, definitive happy ending where he could have adventures but also have a family, I thought it was perfect. And while it's still a little bit early, so far they've kept their promise, Nathan Drake's story has remained untouched, and they keep reinforcing that promise. I would love for there to never be an Uncharted game again because it's so great as is, but that seems like it's not in the cards, which makes me kind of annoyed. But at least I'm pretty confident they aren't going to pull one last ride for Nathan out of nowhere and it'd focus on somebody else, which is pretty admirable considering the popularity of him and this franchise. Thank God also, because as good as Uncharted 4 is, it needed a lot of retcons and non-recyclable arcs to work. How many secret brothers can the man realistically have? We've clearly hit a wall. There's no use dumping water back into the well and bringing it up just to say it's new. But now let's talk about Toy Story. Toy Story 3 was a beloved, beautiful conclusion that was all about the idea of endings and new beginnings, and they said, but what if the movie about endings isn't actually the ending and we just make a Toy Story 4? And sure, a lot of people still like Toy Story 4 because it takes an interesting approach to the themes of the series, but others found it ultimately unnecessary, myself included. It just felt like Pixar couldn't let go of their most tenured series, but fine, whatever, at least they're done. They're making a Toy Story 5? Listen, Woody's already learned about change, he's already learned about self-identity, what is he gonna learn about now? Taxes? How many existential crises can one cowboy have? It's a problem that's admittedly not really fixable. You're not gonna get a studio to agree to leave our little space guy alone because Space Guy has IP recognition, and by the way, totally forgot to mention, this was a movie too. Why? But you always hope that the creatives involved put their foot down and say, hey, let's Breaking Bad this popsicle stand, end it before it sours, and just preserve it as best as possible. I don't really blame showrunners or directors for not recognizing that though. You're having fun making a show, you have new ideas, you're more attached to these characters than anyone else, and frankly when you end something at the perfect time, it doesn't really feel like that in the moment, it always feels premature. How can I blame someone for taking their most prized possession, something that they've likely wanted to make for years, even decades, sensing that it might have a little bit more in the tank and saying, fuck it, we ball, only to be caught in the middle of a highway with their exhaust going like it's in a cartoon. It's hard to say goodbye, but we still need to do it because there are some things we just can't get without endings, like perspective. How do you know what you truly want when you only know one thing? You don't have enough information to make that decision. I mean, think about how corporate jobs have changed in the last 5 years alone. Basically, everyone hated the system, but we kind of just accepted it. And then along came a pandemic that had so many horrible effects, but it did get us to all stop doing things one way for a while and now do them completely different. And as a result, we've seen a rapid push towards remote and hybrid jobs, flexible hours, and even more drastic changes like potential 4-day work weeks. It's not all perfect and there are things to iron out, but there are new options to play around with, and they got implemented way faster because we were forced to change the norm suddenly and worldwide. So now you can actually gauge what work style works for you. Endings also make us more empathetic to one another. I have a friend who's leaving a different city and also striking off on her own, and I didn't even realize how tough that would be until I went through the process myself. So now I've told her that she can just come and talk to me if she feels isolated during that process. All of this change stings for me and it will for her as well, but this is one more person that I can make feel heard and understood through a difficult time. I know it's gonna hit even harder watching scenes in shows or movies where a couple of friends move out of their longtime apartment, but it's also gonna feel way better watching them just goof around for the time that they are together. And I would say that both of those things mean the main point of entertainment, which is to manipulate us into feeling emotions, happy, sad, angry, fulfilled, is now a touch more effective. The more we see and try, the more we feel and hate and love, the more we can unify under those feelings, understand each other's struggles, and take care of each other and ourselves. How can I learn to let go of things that have passed their time in the spotlight when Disney can't even let me let go of an 80-year-old man as a lead action hero? I will say one thing that games specifically should get more credit on this whole front is how many anthological series they have. Think about the most popular series in the medium. Elder Scrolls, GTA, Final Fantasy, new cast of characters, new worlds, new stories every time. This feels like a good compromise where we can keep putting the names of these franchises on stuff, and there will still be some level of similarity, but a lot of the entries are self-contained games or mini-series. That said, sometimes these can't really let go of things either. Final Fantasy VII is now part of a remake process that's taking a decade total to make, and is split into so many parts and versions. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Final Fantasy VII Rehydrated, Final Fantasy VII Remax Agent. You can't just take the 7th Final Fantasy and make it 7 Final Fantasies. That feels illegal. Open world games and live services feel like the market's answer to people who really don't want things to end, and you can see this as either a good or a bad thing. To somebody like me, it's a little bit tough to keep up with all these 60 to 150 hour games that want me to perform the same types of tasks the entire way through. But it can also be a nice return on investment if you can spend an eternity in just a couple of games a year. As much as I feel change is necessary, I also think some things need to be constant, even in life as a whole, partners and family and often homes. So on a much smaller scale, it's nice to know that I can just hop into Zelda every once in a while throughout the entire year, and it's also nice to know that some franchises will return year after year like clockwork. The problem only really comes when you surround yourself by familiarity. All these people on Twitter saying gaming is dying, dude, you played the same game 15 years in a row. That's why it sucks. Knowing something is gonna end from the very beginning also has a very unique feel to it. I actually knew from day one that my time at this place was temporary, and so it kind of influenced how I went about my days. I'd be way more proactive in going out and doing things with my friends because I knew at some point I wouldn't be able to do that again. Which means a big reason why this stuff was so fun to begin with was the fact that there was this impending end influencing all my decisions. Who knows how it would have been if the move had been indefinite. Things are more exciting when you know they're gonna end, which is why it's a little bit unfortunate that something like God of War Ragnarok, which was supposed to tie up the Norse saga, ends without giving us answers to stuff we were told we'd get eventually, and left dozens of threads open for this franchise's future. I like this game and most of its finale a lot, but it didn't feel like a full ending. It felt like a long pause, and that's not what I was anticipating. Generally, I hate doomer talk about how gaming's dying and it's all remakes and uninspired sequels, because that's not true at all, but I won't deny that we're probably seeing record high statistics and clinging to the past. There are a lot of remakes, there are a lot of nostalgic tropes or old characters that make you go, hey, I've seen that guy before, I guess this thing is pretty cool now. It's fun in the moment and sometimes is really effective, but now the thing is sort of stuck in time. I think we always assume that when stuff does end early, that if it kept going it would match the same energy and memories of the things that came before, but that's straight up not true. A good example would be Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which caused such an outcry when it got cancelled after season 5 that I think they stormed the White House. I'm like 99% sure I'm remembering this right. And I was in the same boat. This show was awesome and creative and witty and fun, and I was so sad that it got cancelled, and then suddenly it got picked up for more seasons and everyone cheered and the show got worse. There are some good moments in these last 3 seasons, but they're very few and far between. There are some real lowlights with hollow, soulless comedy and a few outright character assassinations. Whatever magic the first 5 seasons had, it was largely gone here. This whole last year was a real seasons 1 to 5 for me, and I'm angry that it got cut short, but at the same time, I don't know what an actual continuation would have looked like, just like we didn't know when we were begging for the show to come back. Did I want to go through a potential season 6 to 8 situation? Was I prepared for that? I'm moving right now to help my career. If I had refused to do so and just stayed, who's to say I don't start getting frustrated at my career path and project it onto my overall living situation? And then all of a sudden, I resent the place I can now instead look back on so fondly, all because I was too scared of moving on? I guess I'm glad I don't know the answer to those questions. I have one last example to share with you guys before I wrap things up, and just to preface, I wouldn't say I believe in signs from the universe, but this one feels eerily similar to my situation. One of my favorite shows of all time is How I Met Your Mother. If you think that's stupid, you're stupid. It's a great show. I've watched it like 5 times. And something I haven't mentioned yet is that the place that I'm moving to is New York, which is where the show takes place. Now that in and of itself isn't the eerie part, especially considering the Hollywood map of the United States looks like this, but when I visited New York recently before my big move, before I even started getting emotional about any of it, I thought I should rewatch this show again when I move, because parts of it are a love letter to the city. It was going to be the first thing I did when I just sat in my apartment for the first time, and as I rifled through the storylines from the show in my head, one particular plotline stood out. The one around the Arcadian Hotel. Now, to err on the side of caution a la doxing, I'm not going to say exactly why that name is so important, but for the sake of simplicity, you can just imagine that Arcadian was the name of the place that I've been staying at for the last year. For those of you that haven't watched the show, the main character, Ted, is an architect, and he's been given the opportunity to build his own skyscraper in New York, a lifelong dream of his. To build the skyscraper, though, he needs to tear down this building called the Arcadian, a once iconic part of the city that's now been run down pretty badly. He's a little sad to see it go, especially as a fan of the old city, but he also thinks it has to be done. His situation gets a lot tougher, though, when he meets this girl named Zoe outside the building and falls for her hard, only to realize that she's leading the petition to save the Arcadian from demolition. At first, she claims it's because it's an important historical landmark, but it's later revealed that her and her family used to live in the Arcadian, and she doesn't want to see it destroyed because she would lose all those memories. After a lot of back and forth, Ted concludes that the Arcadian has run its course, that the reason Zoe has for keeping it is rooted in the fear of change, and he can't help someone desperately cling on to the past at the cost of his own future. So he helps blow up the Arcadian, with possibly the worst CGI ever put to screen. So how fitting is it that a show that is so important to me, a show that I penciled in as the first thing I would watch when I moved, a show that has a notoriously bad ending but I still hold in such high regard, tackles the concept of endings and change and moving on with a storyline where a building called the Arcadian, which represents a character's fondest memories of when they lived with their favorite people, gets torn down so they can let go of the past, after which the main character can build something new and great in the city of New York. Those memories will always exist in the place they matter most, but holding on to them for dear life only stunts our growth, so we can't be afraid to let things end. To everybody who watched this video all the way to the end, thank you. I hope you enjoyed. I know it was kind of all about me. I did warn you, to be fair, but I think we can all relate to the idea of not being able to let things go, so hopefully you guys still took something out of this. Thank you to everybody who's contributed to the fact that I have a platform for me to even talk about this stuff. Much love to all you guys. The end.
Which meant for the first time in years, the world was wide open. Because kids, when a door closes, well, you know the rest.